Hello and welcome to another STEM Stories podcast. Today we're talking to Dr. Jo Montgomery, who you may see as Dr. Jo Science online. Jo's background is in research science and she works with research scientists and students at the moment, sharing about I imagine, the joy that you found in research science, Jo. That seems to be pretty popular trend in tutors. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I've got probably what you'd call a portfolio career actually, which and I'm sort of, I suppose, a bit of the poster girl for all the places that STEM can take you, and all the different things you can get involved in. So hopefully we'll have a little chat today, and I can share a little bit more about my journey.
I'm enjoying the very biology backdrop behind you there. That is inspiring. I love it.
So yeah, it's a kind of a little bit curated, but mostly just things that I use kind
Mm.
of on a day-to-day basis that I've got around me. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that's
I can
brilliant.
easily just grab.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's it. This is the thing with science. I love teaching online and being able to support students wherever they are, but very much it's hands-on. So to actually have props to demonstrate things with is pretty much an essential.
Very much so. Yeah, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of your current fingers in pies that you have? What kind of things are you working on currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So I describe myself as a scientist and educator. So I do have a background in research science. So I worked as a behavioural neurobiologist for many years, um, basically investigating kind of like how the brain influences behaviour in animals, not in people. And So that's kind of like where I came from. Now, I'm in a research adjacent role, which means I support scientists to carry out that academic research. So I'm in a training position, so I support scientists to develop their skills in talking about their science, in recording their science, and in sharing their science, as well as some kind of like some hands-on skills of developing those things that they need to be able to do their research.
Mm.
And alongside that, I'm also a qualified teacher. So I'm also that's a part-time role, and the rest of my time I spend teaching children,
Mm.
teaching students, but also supporting teachers in teacher development to develop the skills that they need to support students as well. So kind of a few different hats, a few different roles, but everything kind of about sharing my passion for science and for education.
And there's only one of you. How are you doing?
Yeah. Oh,
Amazing.
actually, I was recently cloned in
Oh,
in crochet form, which does help.
I love it. You're a little test tube. So cute. Oh, amazing. I mean, I think it's unquestionable that you enjoy science and you enjoy talking about science. Is this what led you here? How did you discover that this was something that you wanted to get into?
Yeah, that's a really good question actually, and um, I've never really had a grand plan about where I wanted my career to do. I just took opportunities that came my way, and followed the things that I was interested in, really.
Yeah.
So, as I say, I started out as a research scientist, and kind of alongside that, I've always been involved in public engagement and outreach. So, I've been a STEM ambassador for more than 20 years, and really started to enjoy that kind of interaction with student groups that would come in to the organisation that I worked at, um, and kind of that sharing that love and that passion, and that kind of in a kind of a long-winded way, led to me actually then pursuing formal education, so training as a teacher to be able to do that. Um, but again, there wasn't really ever a sort of a grand plan to do these things. So I've worked in public engagement and outreach, running a team of people who were kind of volunteering their time to go into schools, to talk to students, to host industry visits and groups, um, before training as a teacher and then teaching in schools for a number of years. And I'm still teaching now, both online and in a variety of schools kind of in my local area as well, taking kind of hands-on opportunities into schools too. But I suppose those things kind of snuck up on me and developed really, rather than being this is where I want to go, and I definitely have a career path ahead of me. I think I've just sort of taken opportunities to get involved in the things that I've enjoyed as I've meandered through my career.
I love that. There's a few people that I've spoken to who've been STEM ambassadors, and yeah, that's what's prompted me to set my business up, working as a STEM ambassador and realizing that I love science, but communicating and sharing that passion with people right at the beginning of their learning journey is wonderful. It's a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah, it's great.
It sounds like you've had quite a varied path, and this is a pretty, I mean, not necessarily everyone's had varied things that they've got involved in, and it sounds like you're doing lots of things at the moment, but the general theme of taking the opportunities as they come is what's led people to do the most interesting things. Is there any advice that you might give to people around doing that? Because I certainly see that a lot of the time people think, well, that sounds really cool, but I can't do that, or I don't really know how to do that yet. I probably wouldn't be any good at it. It's like, how did you kind of make the decision to try these new things?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, actually, isn't it? And I think there's a lot of pressure on young people actually to have decided what it is that you want to do at a
Yeah.
really early stage. And kind of, I suppose the one piece of advice would be that there's never any doors that are closed to you. There are always other ways round and in. So just kind of be open to those possibilities, really. It's a little bit like, it might be useful to know what you want to do, or at least to know, the sort of things that you're interested in an area that you might want to pursue. But actually being open to those opportunities that are kind of to the left and right of you on your path means that those really exciting opportunities might come your way. So yeah, being open, not necessarily being fixed, but also not being worried that you don't necessarily know what you want to do.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that I've spoken to who've taken quite brave leaps that not everybody would be willing to do, where they genuinely looked at an opportunity and thought, I am not qualified to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm confident that I can learn how to do it. I think that's the difference between people that take opportunities and don't. Like, you don't know how to do anything until you do it.
Until you do it, absolutely. And I do think that STEM subjects actually set you up really well for that, because the kind of, the problem solving, the creative thinking, the finding things out, being curious does kind of lead you to being able to try your hand at all sorts of different things, actually.
Yeah.
So it's a really good footing in kind of springboarding off to all sorts of different things.
Yeah. I like the I mean, it's not always clear necessarily. School isn't the only place that you can learn things, but you don't necessarily learn all of the things that are presented to you the first time you see them. But the whole idea of like scientific theory and scientific process applies to anything in learning. Having an idea about something and then following that idea through to find out a bit more about it. Just generally applying that to anything that you do is very productive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that kind of, that evaluative problem solving ability that you can, as you say, apply to pretty much everything in life.
Yeah. I like applying a science brain to anything. There's nothing that a plan on a spreadsheet can't solve.
Absolutely.
So you've had quite a varied path and you've done some really interesting things. Is there anything that you think that you might do differently if you were to start again?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually. I absolutely love my patchwork portfolio career. The fact that I have the opportunity to get involved in all sorts of lots of different projects. No 2 days look the same. That kind of really suits the way that I work. A slight downside of the way I've approached my career without that grand plan and with just sort of taking opportunities is that I feel like I have taken lots of side steps So I've definitely not had that kind of traditional career trajectory where you climb up a ladder and kind of reach a traditional sort of position of more authority or experience or power, because I've taken so many steps sideways that I've sort of stayed at the same. I'm the same rung of all sorts of different ladders, and some people might see that as I haven't kind of progressed in my career, but actually I see that as kind of amassing all these different experiences, and being able to apply those skills and experiences that I have in different situations. I think it sort of sets me apart and gives me a new perspective on things. And I'm quite happy where I am. But if I were to do things differently, then maybe I might have made some more purposeful decisions, and gone up the ladder a little bit.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I used to work in a pharmaceutical company, and there was I think it was called literally the scientific ladder, of the expectations of what you would do to progress, and it was more qualifications and more authority and more responsibility, and I didn't do that because just any part of it, just to say that this is what I'm going to do for the next 10 years, sounded miserable, no matter how exciting it is. So yeah, I think this is probably a fairly popular attitude, that it's much better to get a variety of experiences than maybe to become the expert in one, unless that one thing is something that you absolutely love.
Yeah, and I think success looks different for different people as well. For
Yeah.
me, success is doing the things that I love and feeling fulfilled by them. So
Yeah.
I think it's really important to have that in mind as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that this is I appreciate that everybody's brain is different, and you understand that better than most. But I just can't imagine the idea of doing the same thing endlessly. And science, the motivation for me is learning about how the world works, and that involves all of the world and not one particular bit of it.
Yeah, and I think there's room for everyone in the world, isn't there? We
Yeah,
do need people with that really narrow focus,
yeah,
to kind of drill away at one particular area. But we also need polymaths who like to bring in vast arrays of different experiences to the things that they do.
yeah. So, um, your research role sounds really interesting to me. You're working with the animal behavior, and I suppose we are essentially animals, so we're probably not that far removed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that my background in animal behaviour does set me in quite good stead for a teaching role as well, from that point of view. Yeah, so I was kind of working with animals, different types of animals, pigs, sheep, seals, all sorts of different things, kind of looking at expressions of behaviour, both in terms of abnormal behaviours that might be expressed in captivity,
Oh,
and kind of normal behaviors, social behaviors that you might see in animals. For example, kind of groups of pigs, you get this kind of hierarchy of pigs that like to be in charge and pigs that don't so much,
yeah,
and looking at kind of like what's different in their brain and in terms of their circulating hormones and in that behavior that presents as well, and kind of looking at that interplay. So I guess even from the very start, actually, of my research career, although academic research can be very focused and narrow down one particular path, even then I was actually bringing in different disciplines into my research and looking at kind of in a holistic way at what was going on. So both in terms of control from the brain, but also that external expression of behavior as well.
it's so interesting. I think animals are much more complicated than we give them credit for. They're not massively different than us, are they?
No, not at all. No.
No. As you're talking about like pigs that like to be in charge, I'm just picturing Animal Farm, literally.
Yes, little bit George Orwell indeed.
Chief pig. Oh, cute. So is that informing like and you talk about the differences in behavior in the wild and behavior in captivity, is that informing like care conditions for the animals?
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked on one particular project that was looking at abnormal behaviours that you might see in captivity in seals, actually, in particular. But there are, huge projects that work on this sort of thing in the amazing job that zoos do. And I think lots of people don't actually understand that there's a huge amount of research that goes on in the zoo community as well, both in terms of conservation and animal welfare, often informing practice in the wild, but using the animals that they've got, in zoological collections to do research as well. And huge amounts of work's gone into environmental enrichment to improve welfare and conditions for animals in captivity. So looking at, if you understand the behaviour, you can understand when something's not looking quite right as well, so that you can then address that and meet the animal's needs too.
Yeah. So I find quite interesting because I love animals. I love going to zoos and to farms and seeing them, but then you always have the understanding that this is not their natural habitat. This is not where they would choose to live. And obviously there's a little bit of a compromise in the fact that they are now in captivity, and they would probably, like a leopard in the Sahara would have a massive, massive ground that they would walk over. But this is the balance. Like, these are endangered animals, and the fact that they live in these zoos is a lot of the time the only reason why they still exist.
Yes, certainly for some animals, absolutely. They're there for maintaining populations. There might be captive breeding programs to try and maintain that diversity across the world as well. So zoos typically don't actually own the animals that they house in them. They're kind of on loan, if you like. And there's often movement of the animals throughout the zoo world as well, so as part of a breeding program to maintain that genetic diversity and in some species to create more individuals that might possibly be released into the wild as well.
Yeah. A fantastic opportunity to see some incredible animals that you would never otherwise have the opportunity to see.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of roles for zoos in terms of education, conservation, and all sorts of applications for that.
Yeah. So for a student that's at school now thinking, I'm enjoying my science lessons and I'm enjoying learning about these things on the curriculum, and the idea of being a research scientist sounds very interesting. There's going to be, like, when you say research scientists, there's about a million different jobs involved in that. What kind of advice would you give to this teenager about how to look at the options that they have?
Yeah, that's a really a good and far-reaching question, actually, because obviously there are lots of different types of science. So whether you're interested in marine biology or quantum physics, then there are obviously aspects of whatever science it is that you're interested in that you could research. But kind of layered onto that then there are so many different roles that there might be and routes into working in research. You might be doing research in an academic institution, so a university or a research institute. You might be doing research in industry, so maybe in a pharmaceutical company or in some sort of commercial sector. So there are lots of different ways to do research, and then there are different kind of jobs in it as well. So you might be being a researcher, you might go to university and get a degree, do a higher degree, a PhD, then work as what's called a postdoctoral researcher, and kind of thinking about that scientist ladder or pyramid, kind of move your way up to have your own group and have other scientists working with you. But you also might be a player at different stages of that too. You could be a research assistant, kind of supporting other people's research. You might have a technical specialist role. So you might be the absolute expert at and kind of, a particular technique or a piece of equipment that's really fundamental. Or you might have, a kind of some sort of other research adjacent role, as they might be called, that's supporting research of other people. So there are lots and lots of ways into it. In terms of advice, it's just kind of doing a bit of research really and finding out the opportunities that are out there. I think podcasts like this are a brilliant way to find out all the different career options and opportunities that there are. And if you're inspired by some conversations that you've seen and heard, then go and dig a bit deeper and see if you can find out more about those people, and how they got to where they are, what sort of things are available. And the classic advice really is you need to get some experience, and that can be harder, easier said than done. But equally, with all these online opportunities we have now, there are all sorts of opportunities to get involved in virtual work experience things as well. So I know, for example, just down the road from me is the Wellcome Genome campus, where they discovered the sequence of the human genome, among all sorts of other things. So lots and lots of genomic science happening there. And they run a really brilliant online work experience program so that they can reach all sorts of people in far-flung places. So there are lots of opportunities like that if you can't get some kind of hands-on experience, in a lab or with a scientist or somewhere near you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So just last week I was learning about the apprenticeship and T-level opportunities that are coming about, and they were talking about a degree apprenticeship where you get paid to get a degree that you can do remotely from home, and you're working already for a scientific company. I was like, this is amazing. Can I be a teenager?
Yeah, there are so many more routes and opportunities available. These days there's definitely no one size fits all and no one path. So yeah, lots and lots of different ways into scientific careers.
I think that potentially can add its own level of overwhelm, but it's certainly worth looking into the opportunities, because all of the different careers events and apprenticeship talks and online resources for helping you to connect to opportunities. They were sharing things like Unifrog and UCAS websites. Yeah, it's overwhelming, but it's helpful to find people to have the conversations with, so you get a bit more of a picture of what does this next step look like after having taken it. And some of them, when you speak to the person that's doing it, you think that sounds great for you, but maybe not for me.
For me, absolutely. Yeah. And actually, I think what's really important is that finding out the things that you don't want to do is just as important as finding the things that you do want to do.
Yeah, it's actually this is what I found quite surprising, because I got an interest in science from looking at some very specific role models, and I had this picture of what it looks like to be a scientist, and I was picturing that. I think I just watched a lot of CSI, and I'm thinking I'm going to be one of these CSI scientists who's in the lab all day playing with all of these cool new things. That's not what it looks like at all, and it can be completely different. If you get the advice and suggestion from a different person who's working in a different field, they might be somebody that spends all day at the desk and does most of their science from home, or they might be somebody that does all of their science at the top of a volcano. No.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no one thing of what science looks like, and there's, I would say it's the most brilliant field to go into, because there is something for everyone. You can be in a rainforest or in the middle of the Sahara in Africa, or up at the top of a volcano, or on the International Space Station, or you can be analyzing data on a computer, or working in a lab, all sorts of different things.
You must have had some interesting days when you were doing animal behavior studies and seals. I mean, that's definitely not lab work. It's not desk work.
It's definitely not lab work, no. And again, I think there's a theme here, is that I like to be involved in all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
Is that yes, sometimes I'd be covered in seawater and freezing cold, working with animals out in the field. Sometimes I'd be in the lab analysing samples, and sometimes I would be presenting at conferences or writing scientific articles. So there are the whole variety to the things that you do.
Well, that's what I like, but exactly like you say, there's going to be some people that there's a specific thing that you're interested in, and you just want to get as much out of that as possible. So yeah, it's very important to take the opportunity that appeals to you, I think, is what we're learning from this conversation.
Yeah. there are ways to do science in the way that you thrive on.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Jo. I mean, I am very jealous of the fact that you got a job that allowed you to go and play with seals and pigs at the same time. There's no reason why I can't now go and play with seals and pigs.
Indeed. Yeah.
So when you were at school, what kind of things did you most enjoy learning about?
That's a really good question, actually. And whilst I am clearly passionate about science, I was always interested in lots of different things as well, and I still am. So I think it probably wasn't clear, although I was the child who was always outside digging in the mud, finding, mini beasts and all sorts of things, and mixing potions on the bathroom floor. It probably wasn't that clear that I would be a scientist when I was younger. I really loved writing stories. I loved history. I really love languages, and I'm quite creative and like art as well. So there were lots of ways that I could have gone, and I'm not really sure. Sort of. So I did have thoughts that I might like to be a doctor for a while or a vet, but I realised that actually I was probably more interested in the kind of the science of what was going on underneath those things rather than necessarily wanting to work directly with patients. So I don't know at what point really. I decided I was going to study biology at university because I was interested in that sort of thing. But I did also do a degree where I did biology and French, so I kind of kept my options open quite far. So, and for my A levels, I did biology, chemistry, French, and Latin. So even at that point, I clearly wasn't sure which route I was going to go down.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a theme here. I've just done things that interest me rather than having a grand plan of where they would take me.
Yeah, I was the same. I did biology, chemistry, French, and English literature. Why? Why? Just exactly like you say, those are the things that you find interesting. Those are the things that you should carry on doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So just for my own interest, because obviously what I do is STEM tuition. Have you ever worked with a tutor?
So firstly, I do also do a little bit of tutoring.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, yes. But I had a maths tutor when I was at school because so in fact, when I was in what's now called year 10, my maths teacher at the very start of year 10 said, you're going to really struggle to pass GCSE maths.
Oh,
I've got a PhD, so that was an interesting
yeah.
an interesting route from there.
Nice.
And I did have a maths tutor to support me and just kind of to go over the maths content, I suppose. I got an A at the end of year 10 in my maths GCSE. So I think something that's really interesting is that we can sometimes have a bit of a spiky profile, and learning is not linear at all. And we can have these kind of peaks and troughs and things. And sometimes you just need someone to kind of to guide you a little way. So for me, having that maths tutor just to kind of to hold your hand and see you through the process clearly paid out for me because I did quite well in maths in the end.
It's helpful to have. I mean, obviously we have our parents and we have our teachers, but I think whenever my parents said something that gave me praise, and I was just thinking, well, obviously you think so. So to have somebody else like in your corner is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you very much, Jo. So if people are interested in learning more about what Jo does, I recommend you go and look at Dr. Jo Science online. I'm very interested in learning more about animal behavior and how you were studying that. But yeah, I'd recommend going and having a look into that. And as we mentioned, have a look at the opportunities that are available in the things that you're interested in. I'm sure you'll be able to find something that inspires you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Jo. I really enjoyed talking to you. I hope you have a good day.
Thanks, Georgina. You too.
Hi, I'm your podcast host, Georgina Green, and the founder of Green Tutors STEM Specialist Tuition Company. We've been supporting students with their GCSE and A-level maths, science and STEM subject studies since 2011, and our team all work and have a passion for STEM professions such as engineering and chemical synthesis and medicines and all sorts of fantastic things in the world of STEM beyond the curriculum, which is what we bring into our lessons to make them more exciting, and the reason I wanted to share this podcast with you all. Alongside that, we've launched the STEM Educators Academy, where other STEM professionals and STEM education enthusiasts can come and learn about how to grow their STEM education practices together. If you're interested in any of the support that we offer, get in touch at greentutors.uk and you can access some of the free resources on there as well. This podcast would not exist without the sponsorship of STEMazing. I'm very grateful to STEMazing, not only for sponsoring our podcast, but for the brilliant work that they're doing, fostering inspiration and inclusion in STEM. I recommend having a look at their website, stemazing.co.uk, which is what you can see right now, to see a bit more about the work that they do. Alongside the award-winning Inspiration Academy, bringing events into primary schools and inspiring young people to see their future in STEM, because you can't be what you can't see. There's a fantastic membership, which I'm a part of, for women in STEM to do more of this, fostering inspiration and inclusion in STEM, with monthly content shared on empowerment, inspiration and community, will help you to be a better role model and mentor to people in STEM. And finally, there's a brilliant library here of role models in STEM that you can go and have a look at and hear more about their STEM stories. Here's a shout out for our sponsor, Navigated Tutor. If you haven't seen this, I recommend having a look if you're in education. The Navigated Tutor platform gives access to a quarterly webinar and magazine and training resources. The first one I've already read and attended, and in minutes learned lots that's going to make a massive impact on the way that I support my students. This is brought to you by Arthur Moore, who is not only a fantastic tutor but also the host of the Tea and Teaching podcast and Tutoring Tips podcast, two of my most listened podcasts. So I recommend that you go and check those out if you're working in education at all, and sign yourself up to the Navigated Tutor platform for some fantastic CPD. You can get access to this at mooreedu.thinkific.com. That's mooreedu.thinkific.com.